"Grandma, why did you leave me here?" said the abandoned girl, but a millionaire saw her and did something unexpected. Watch until the end. Comment telling me what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain pounded hard on the tin roof of the abandoned house, creating a constant drumming that masked Madison's quiet sobs. At 4 years old, she didn't fully grasp the concept of time, but she knew that 3 suns had risen and set since Grandma Valerie had left, promising to be right back. The faded pink teddy bear was soaked in her arms, a result of the leaks that dripped from the holes in the porch roof where she took shelter. "Grandma will be back soon," she murmured repeatedly, like a mantra that kept her connected to hope. Her clothes were wet and stuck to her small body, and hunger gnawed at her empty stomach for the second night in a row. Even so, she remained in the exact spot where Valerie had left her, afraid that if she moved, the woman wouldn't be able to find her when she returned. The dirt road that ran in front of the property was completely deserted. It was a rural part of Oak Creek County, where houses were far apart, separated by cornfields and small farms. Madison had tried to play with the dolls Valerie had left for her, but the loneliness was heavier than any entertainment. Her only companions were the crickets at night and the birds that sang during the day. On the morning of that third day, when the storm finally subsided, the sound of an approaching engine made Madison's heart race. She quickly got up from the old chair where she was sitting and ran to the edge of the porch, expecting to see Valerie's blue car. But the vehicle that appeared around the bend was different. A silver pickup truck that was smoking and making strange noises. Robert Mason was on his way back from a frustrating meeting with suppliers when his truck started showing signs of trouble. At 52, he had built a solid furniture company, but he had recently been facing financial difficulties that left him increasingly stressed. His wife, Susan, constantly advised him to slow down his work pace, but he couldn't stop. When the truck finally died, with a loud metallic clang, Robert got out and kicked the tire in frustration. It was just what he needed to top off a terrible day. He was pulling his phone from his pocket to call a mechanic when he noticed movement on the porch of the abandoned house. "What the hell?" he muttered, seeing a small figure watching him. Madison froze when she realized it wasn't Valerie. The tall man, with graying hair and a prominent belly, was looking at her. With surprise, she clutched the teddy bear to her chest and took a few steps back, but remained visible. "Hi, little one," Robert said, slowly approaching the broken fence that marked the property line. "Where are your parents?" Madison didn't answer. Valerie had taught her not to talk to strangers, but she had also promised she would come back. The confusion in her 4-year-old mind was overwhelming. Robert looked at the child more closely. The wet clothes, the dirty face, the way she cringed. It all suggested something was very wrong. He looked around and saw that the house truly did seem abandoned. The windows were broken, the yard was overgrown with weeds, and there were no signs of adult life. "What's your name?" he tried again, this time in a softer voice. "Madison," she replied in a barely audible whisper. "Madison, where's your family?" The girl pointed down the road. "Grandma went to get food. She'll be back." Robert felt a pang in his chest. There was something deeply wrong with this situation. No responsible adult would leave a child so young alone in a place like this. "How long ago did your grandma leave?" Madison held up 3 small fingers. Robert initially thought she meant 3 hours, but when he looked closer at the girl's condition, he suspected it could be 3 days. The storm that was gathering again made the decision for him. He couldn't leave a child out in the elements, regardless of the circumstances. "Madison, how about you come with me? We'll look for your grandma, and in the meantime, you can stay somewhere warm." The girl hesitated, looking down the empty road one more time. What if she comes back and can't find me? We'll leave a note, Robert said, improvising, so she'll know where you are. Madison considered the offer. She was very cold, very hungry, and the man seemed kind. Besides, maybe he could find Valerie faster than she could by waiting there. When she finally agreed, Robert helped her into the pickup truck, which miraculously started again after a few tries. During the drive to his house, he called Susan. "Honey, I'm coming home with an unexpected guest," he said, choosing his words carefully. "A child I found alone on the road." Susan Mason was watering her orchids in the greenhouse when her husband's call came. At 47, she had retired early from clinical psychology after a severe depressive episode left her unable to help patients when she herself was drowning in sadness. The premature loss of their son, Brian, 5 years ago, had completely changed the course of her life. "What do you mean you found a child?" she asked, dropping the watering can. "It's complicated. She was alone in an abandoned house, apparently for days. I couldn't just leave her there." Susan felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity. Since losing Brian, she had avoided contact with small children, as the pain was still too raw. But something in Robert's voice told her the situation was serious. When they arrived at their comfortable home in an affluent neighborhood of Oak Creek County, Madison was impressed by the well-kept garden and colorful flowers. It was so different from the abandoned house where she had spent the last few days. Susan was waiting for them at the door, and when she saw the small, disheveled girl, her dormant maternal instincts immediately kicked in. "My God, Robert, look at the state she's in." "That's what I was trying to tell you," he said, carrying Madison in his arms. "She was completely alone." Susan guided them inside, her heart pounding. Madison observed everything with wide, curious eyes, her extraordinary memory already recording every detail of the house, the color of the walls, the scent of lavender, the arrangement of the furniture. "First, let's take care of her," Susan said, taking control of the situation. "A warm bath, dry clothes, and food. Then we'll figure out what happened." While Susan prepared the bath, Madison clung to her teddy bear, watching the woman's every move. There was something comforting in Susan's soft voice, very different from the harsh tone Valerie had used lately. "Are you hungry, sweetie?" Susan asked, helping Madison undress. The girl nodded vigorously. She hadn't eaten anything substantial in over 24 hours. During the bath, Susan noticed some strange marks on Madison's arms. They weren't serious injuries, but they suggested neglect. Her mother's heart ached even more. After the bath and a simple meal, Madison finally relaxed enough to talk. Sitting on the comfortable living room sofa, wrapped in a fluffy bathrobe, she slowly told her story. Valerie had appeared in her life a few months ago after her real mommy had gone on a very long trip. Valerie said she was her grandmother and would take care of her. Robert and Susan exchanged worried glances. The story didn't make sense, and there were obvious gaps that a 4-year-old couldn't fill. "Madison, do you remember what it was like before Grandma Valerie showed up?" Susan asked gently. The girl's face tensed in concentration. Her extraordinary memory began to work, bringing up fragmented images of another place, other people. "There was a lady who cried a lot, and there were men talking loud." Madison's words left a heavy silence in the room. Robert felt they had stumbled upon something much bigger and more complicated than they had imagined. The simple discovery of an abandoned child was turning into a mystery that could have dangerous consequences. That night, after Madison had fallen asleep in the guest room, Robert and Susan talked late into the night about what to do. They knew they couldn't just return the girl to whoever she belonged to without fully understanding the situation, but they also didn't know where to begin their investigation. What they didn't know was that at that very moment, on the other side of town, Valerie was having a tense phone conversation, explaining to someone that there was a little problem with one of her packages and that she would need more time to resolve the situation. The next morning brought a routine that Madison hadn't experienced in months. Susan woke her gently, offered breakfast with warm toast and milk, and even found some children's clothes stored in closets that hadn't been opened in years. The clothes had belonged to Brian, but Susan managed to push through the momentary pain to see Madison wearing her son's colorful t-shirts. "Today we're going to try to find out more about your family," Susan explained as she combed Madison's curly hair. "Do you remember Grandma Valerie's full name?" Madison frowned, concentrating. "Valerie of the children," she said finally, with the seriousness of someone who believed she was being very precise. Robert, listening from the kitchen, stopped stirring his coffee. "Of the children? What a strange name. Maybe it's not a real last name," Susan murmured. "It could be how people knew her." During the morning, Robert cancelled his work appointments and decided to visit the abandoned house where he had found Madison. He wanted to check for any clues about Valerie's whereabouts or any information that could clarify the situation. When he arrived at the site, he found the property exactly as he had left it, except for one detail that made his blood run cold. On the porch where Madison had been waiting, there was a note tacked to the door with a rock. With trembling hands, he unfolded the crumpled paper. "I know you took the girl. She isn't yours. I'm coming to get what's mine." The handwriting was jagged, clearly written in a hurry and with agitation. Robert looked around, feeling watched. The sense of being observed was so intense that he quickly got back into his truck and drove back home, constantly checking the rearview mirror. Meanwhile, at home, Susan was discovering extraordinary things about Madison. The girl showed an impressive memory, recalling minute details of places and people she had met. While flipping through a magazine, Madison pointed to a photo of a random street and said, "I've been there. There was a yellow dog at the door of the blue house." "When did you go down that street, sweetie?" Susan asked. "With Grandma Valerie. We went to see a lady who cried a lot. Grandma said she was going to give her baby to a good family." Madison's words sent a chill down Susan's spine. She was beginning to understand that Valerie wasn't just a neglectful grandmother. She seemed to be involved in something much more serious. When Robert returned, his pale face immediately alerted Susan that something had happened. He showed her the note, and they both fell silent for several minutes. "We need to get professional help," Susan said finally. "This is beyond our ability to handle." "But who? The police? What if Valerie really has legal rights to her?" Robert was clearly distraught. The answer came unexpectedly. That afternoon, while Madison was playing in the garden under Susan's supervision, a young woman appeared at the gate. Jennifer Scott, 38, was a social worker from the county and had received an anonymous tip about a child possibly in an irregular situation. "Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Scott, a social worker. I received information that you are caring for a girl who may be at risk." Robert and Susan looked at each other, surprised. They hadn't made any official report. "Please, come in," Susan said after a moment's hesitation. "I think you need to know a few things." Jennifer was a determined woman with sharp eyes that immediately assessed the domestic situation. She noted that Madison was well cared for, fed, and seemingly comfortable, which initially reassured her. During the ensuing conversation, Jennifer revealed information that completely changed the couple's perspective on the situation. "We've been investigating a woman named Valerie Ferreira for a few months. She has a history of irregularities related to childcare." "What kind of irregularities?" Robert asked. Jennifer hesitated before answering. "We suspect she's involved in a scheme of illegally separating children from their families. Desperate families pay her to temporarily care for unwanted children, but these children then disappear from the system. Susan felt her blood run cold. Are you saying Madison might have been sold? I can't confirm that yet, but there are indications. Valerie presents herself as a temporary caregiver for families in crisis, especially young, single mothers without resources. After a while, she disappears with the children and they reappear in other situations. Madison, who had been playing seemingly oblivious to the conversation, suddenly approached Jennifer. "You have the same perfume as the lady who cried," she said, surprising everyone. Jennifer knelt down to the girl's level. "What lady, sweetie?" "The one whose baby Grandma Valerie took. She cried a lot and said she didn't want to, but Grandma said it was for the best." Jennifer's heart raced. This could be the confirmation she had been looking for. "Madison, do you remember what this lady looked like? What was her name?" The girl closed her eyes, using her extraordinary memory. "She had long black hair, and she had a mark on her hand like this," she said, drawing the shape of a scar in the air. "Her name was Faith." Jennifer jotted everything down quickly. She knew that name from the files she was investigating. Faith Smith, 19, had sought social assistance 3 months ago, claiming that her newborn daughter had been taken by a woman who had promised to temporarily care for the child. "This is very important, Madison. Do you remember anything else about this woman?" "She lived in a small house with a lot of other people, and there was a man who was always yelling at her." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together for Jennifer. Faith's case had been closed due to insufficient evidence, but Madison's account could reopen the investigation. "I need to take this information to my supervisor," Jennifer said, standing up. "You did the right thing by taking care of her, but I need to warn you that the situation could get complicated." "How so?" asked Robert. "If Valerie is really involved in this scheme, she won't give up on getting Madison back easily. The girl could be an important witness, even at her young age." That night, after Jennifer left, Robert and Susan felt lost. They had taken in an abandoned child out of compassion, but now they were at the center of an investigation that could have dangerous consequences. "We can't just hand her over," Susan said as she checked to make sure Madison was sleeping soundly, not after learning she might be in danger. "But we also don't know if we have the legal right to keep her here," Robert replied. "What if her real family shows up?" "Her real family," Susan murmured, "might be the very one looking for her through Jennifer." In the middle of the night, Madison woke up from a nightmare. She ran to the couple's room, something she hadn't done since Brian was little. Susan welcomed her into the bed, and the girl whispered between sobs, "I dreamed that Grandma Valerie was mad at me. She said I talked too much." Susan held Madison tightly, feeling a fierce protectiveness grow in her heart. She had lost one child, but maybe fate was giving her a chance to save this one. What none of them knew was that, just a few miles away, Valerie was meeting with other people in a dimly lit room, planning how to get Madison back before the girl could reveal more secrets that would put them all in danger. And among those people was someone very close to Robert, someone he trusted completely. The following days brought a false sense of normalcy. Madison adapted to the routine of the Mason household with an ease that touched Susan's heart. The girl helped water the plants, drew colorful birds with crayons, and always waited for Robert to come home from work, sitting by the living room window. Jennifer had returned twice during the week, each time with new questions for Madison. The child's extraordinary memory continued to reveal important details about Valerie's activities. She remembered other children she had seen briefly, whispered conversations between adults, and specific places she had visited during the months under the woman's care. There was a house where Grandma Valerie left some kids, Madison recounted in one session with Jennifer. It was a house with lots of small rooms, and there was a lady who cooked rice every day. "Do you remember where this house was, sweetie?" Madison closed her eyes, concentrating. near a place with lots of big trees, and there was a blue sign at the entrance to the street. Jennifer noted every detail, knowing this information could be crucial in locating other children possibly involved in the same scheme. Meanwhile, Robert was facing growing problems at his company. Adam Miller, his trusted accountant for over 10 years, had been acting strangely for the past few weeks. He was arriving late, avoiding eye contact during meetings, and seemed nervous whenever Robert mentioned specific financial matters. "Adam, I need the transportation reports for the last 6 months," Robert said on a Thursday afternoon, walking into the accounting office. The 45-year-old man, traditionally organized and efficient, nervously shuffled papers on his desk. "I'm still organizing the documents, Robert. There were some irregularities I need to check." "What kind of irregularities?" Adam avoided his boss's gaze. "Nothing serious. Just some discrepancies in the delivery records." Robert left the room with a strange feeling. He had known Adam long enough to tell when something was bothering him, but he had never seen the accountant so flustered. That evening, during dinner, Madison made a remark that made Robert's blood run cold. "Uncle Robert, the man who came here today, looked like the man Grandma Valerie knew." "What man, sweetie?" Susan asked. "The one with glasses who carries a black briefcase. He used to talk to Grandma about important papers." Robert felt the world spin. "Madison, are you sure? Where did you see this man with Grandma Valerie?" The girl nodded with conviction. "At the house with many rooms. He gave papers to Grandma, and she gave him money." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert realized that Adam, his trusted accountant, might be involved in Valerie's scheme. This would explain his recent nervousness and the irregularities in the documents. "Susan, I need to talk to you," he said, leading his wife to the kitchen while Madison finished her meal. "Do you think it's possible?" Susan whispered after hearing her husband's suspicions. "Unfortunately, yes. Adam has access to all the company's documents, including the transport vehicles. If someone wanted to use our fleet for illegal activities without my knowledge..." The revelation completely changed the dynamics of the situation. It wasn't just a matter of helping an abandoned child. Robert might have been unwittingly facilitating Valerie's criminal activities through his own company. The next morning, Robert decided to confront Adam directly. He arrived at the office early and found the accountant already going through old files, clearly looking for something specific. "Good morning, Adam. Can we talk?" The man jumped, dropping some papers on the floor. "Robert, you're in early today. I need you to be honest with me. What business do you have with a woman named Valerie?" Adam's face instantly turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. A 4-year-old girl told me she saw you giving documents to this woman and receiving money in return." Adam collapsed into his chair, his hands trembling. "Robert, you don't understand. They forced me. I didn't want to get involved." "Who forced you? And involved in what exactly?" "Valerie found out that I had some gambling problems. I owed a lot of money to dangerous people. She offered to help, but then she started blackmailing me." Robert felt a mix of anger and disappointment. "What did you do with my company's documents?" "She needed legitimate transportation records. She used our shipping invoices to justify the movement of children between cities. I falsified some deliveries that never happened." The reality hit Robert like a punch. His company had been used as a front for a child trafficking ring, and he had no idea. "How long has this been going on?" "About 8 months, Adam admitted, tears in his eyes. "I wanted to stop, but she said she'd report me for document forgery if I didn't continue." That moment, the company phone rang. Adam answered with trembling hands, and his expression grew even more terrified during the call. "It was her," he said after hanging up. "Valerie. She knows the child is with you, and she's very angry." "What did she say?" that you have 24 hours to return, Madison. Otherwise, she's going to tell the police that our company was illegally transporting children. Robert stood up abruptly. She's blackmailing me with the very crime she committed using my company? Robert, she has fake evidence that incriminates us. The documents I forged could get us into serious trouble. The situation was escalating quickly. Robert couldn't just hand Madison over to Valerie, but he also couldn't ignore the blackmail threat that could destroy his company and his reputation. He immediately called Jennifer, explaining the new twist. The social worker listened to everything in silence before responding. "This might be exactly what we needed to close in on Valerie," she said. "If Adam cooperates, we can turn him into a witness for the prosecution." "But what about her blackmail? If we can prove the documents were forged under duress, that could protect you legally. The important thing now is not to give in to the pressure." That afternoon, Jennifer came to the Masons' house for an emergency meeting. She brought with her information that once again changed the course of the investigation. "We've located Faith Smith," she announced. "The young woman Madison remembers. She's willing to testify against Valerie." "Where has she been all this time?" Susan asked. "In hiding. After she lost her daughter, she tried to report Valerie but was threatened. She spent months afraid to speak up." Madison, who was playing on the living room floor, looked up when she heard the name. "Faith? The lady with black hair who cried?" "That's right, sweetie, and she really wants to meet you." What Jennifer didn't mention was that Faith had revealed something surprising. It wasn't the first time she had crossed paths with the Mason family. Years ago, as a teenager, she had benefited from a social program that Robert quietly funded. The connection between past and present was about to reveal coincidences none of them could have imagined. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Valerie was visited by people who were not at all happy with the way things were going. The pressure on her was mounting, and the threats she made against Robert were actually desperate attempts to maintain control over a scheme that was beginning to fall apart. The meeting with Faith was set to take place at Jennifer's office, in a neutral and safe environment. Susan accompanied Madison, who was visibly anxious the entire way. The girl clutched her pink teddy bear tightly and repeatedly asked if the lady who cried was still sad. When Faith entered the room, the recognition was immediate. Madison ran to her with a spontaneity that surprised everyone, and Faith knelt to receive the child, tears streaming down her face. "Madison, look how you've grown," Faith said, her voice choked with emotion. "I looked for you for so long." At 19, Faith Smith's face bore the marks of someone who had suffered greatly for her age. Her eyes were large and expressive, but there was a deep sadness in them that contrasted with the joy of the reunion. "Auntie Faith, where's your baby?" Madison asked, with the innocence typical of her age. Faith looked at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "My baby is... she's far away, sweetie. Auntie Valerie took her, remember?" "But you didn't want her to." "Don't take her. I remember you cried and said no." Madison's simple words were like a stab to Faith's heart. "That's true. I didn't want her to. But Auntie Valerie said it was for the best, that I couldn't take good care of her." During the conversation that followed, with Susan and Jennifer present, shocking details began to emerge. Faith told them how she had met Valerie at a moment of extreme vulnerability. She had just given birth, had no family support, and was facing pressure from a violent ex-boyfriend. "Valerie showed up at the hospital where I was," she said. "She knew my situation and could help. She offered to take care of Anna Grace temporarily, just until I got on my feet." "Anna Grace was your daughter's name?" Susan asked. "Yes. She was born prematurely, needed special care. Valerie said she knew a family who could help with the medical costs while I found a job." Madison, who was listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "I saw baby Anna Grace. She was tiny and cried a lot. Grandma Valerie gave her to a man and a lady in a big house." Faith's blood ran cold. "You saw them? When? Where?" "It was at a house with a pretty garden. The man wore a suit and the lady had yellow hair. They gave Grandma Valerie a lot of money." Jennifer was frantically writing down every word. This was direct proof that Valerie was selling children, not just temporarily caring for them. "Madison, do you remember anything else about this man and lady?" Jennifer asked. The girl concentrated, using her photographic memory. "Their car was black and shiny, and it had gold numbers on the front, and they talked funny like people on TV." "A different accent?" Jennifer pressed. "Yeah, and the lady called the man Love in another language." Faith was visibly shaken. Knowing that her daughter had been sold to strangers, possibly from another country, was devastating. "How am I ever going to find her now?" "We'll find her," Susan said, touching Faith's arm. "We won't give up." That same afternoon, while the women were talking in Jennifer's office, Robert faced a tense situation at his company. Valerie had shown up in person, accompanied by two men who were clearly not social workers. "Mr. Mason," Valerie said with false cordiality, "I've come to get my granddaughter. I know she's being well cared for, but I need to take her back now." Robert watched her closely. Valerie was about 55, with a disheveled appearance and a calculating look that made him immediately uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but the child is under the care of the proper authorities. If you have legal rights to her, you need to go through the appropriate channels." "Appropriate channels?" Valerie laughed bitterly. "I don't think you understand the situation, Mr. Mason. Your company has been very useful to our business. It would be a shame if something happened to this productive partnership." The threat was clear. One of the men accompanying her took a step forward, clearly intimidating him. "I will not be blackmailed," Robert said, trying to keep his voice steady despite his growing fear. "Blackmail is an ugly word," Valerie replied. "I prefer to think of it as protecting mutual interests. You give me Madison back, and I'll forget that your trucks transported children without proper documentation." At that moment, Adam appeared at the office door, clearly terrified. "Robert, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Valerie turned to the accountant with flashing eyes. "Adam, dear, just the person I wanted to see." I don't have any more documents for you," Adam stammered. "I already told you I'm done with that." "Done?" she asked in a dangerously low voice. "You don't just stop a business like ours, Adam. You know that." The tension in the air was palpable. Robert realized he was at the center of a situation that could easily spiral out of control. Adam was visibly terrified, and the two men with Valerie didn't look like they were willing to take no for an answer. "I'll give you 24 hours to reconsider," Valerie said finally. "After that, things could get complicated. For everyone." After the group left, Adam collapsed into a chair, shaking. "Robert, they won't stop. Valerie said if she doesn't get Madison back, she'll report our company as being involved in the scheme. We have to give the girl up." "Never," Robert said firmly. "I'm not handing a child over to these criminals." "But our company—" "We can rebuild the company. Our conscience, we can't." That night, Robert told Susan everything when she returned with Madison. The atmosphere at home was tense, and even Madison, with her childlike sensitivity, could tell something was wrong. "Is Uncle Robert worried?" She observed during dinner. "Is it because of Grandma Valerie?" "A little, sweetie," Susan admitted. "But don't you worry. We're going to sort everything out." "I don't want to go back to Grandma Valerie," Madison said quietly. "She got mad when I drew birdies, and she didn't let me sing." Susan's heart broke. "You're not going back to her. I promise." Later, after Madison had fallen asleep, Robert and Susan discussed their options. They could run away with the girl, but that would make them criminals. They could turn Madison over to the authorities, but they had no guarantee she would be safe. Or they could fight, even knowing it could cost them everything they had built. She trusts us, Susan said. For the first time in months, she feels safe. How can we break that trust? But if we lose everything, protecting an innocent child, we'll still have our dignity. The decision was made. They would fight for Madison, regardless of the consequences. What they didn't know was that, at that very moment, Jennifer was working late into the night, gathering evidence against Valerie, and one of those pieces of evidence had come from an unexpected source. Faith had remembered something crucial about the day she lost her daughter, information that could completely change the course of the entire investigation. Furthermore, the connections from the past between Faith and the Mason family were about to be revealed in a way no one could have imagined, creating a web of relationships that would transform this family's fight against criminals into something much larger and more significant. The next morning would bring revelations that would put everyone in danger, but also offer the first real hope for justice they had seen since the beginning of this journey. The phone rang at 5 in the morning, startling Robert and Susan awake. It was Jennifer, her voice charged with urgency and excitement. "Robert, I need you to come to my office right now. We have a situation that changes everything." What happened? Faith remembered something crucial, and we've identified the couple who bought Anna Grace. But there's more, so much more. An hour later, they were all gathered in Jennifer's office. Madison was asleep in Susan's lap. Still tired from the early awakening, Faith sat with a folder of documents in her hand, her eyes red from crying and waiting. "Tell, and then what you remembered," Jennifer said to Faith. The young woman took a deep breath before she began. "When Valerie took my daughter, she mentioned that she'd known the couple for years. She said she had helped them before, with another child." "Another child?" Susan asked, instinctively pulling Madison closer. "Yes. And she said something about this first child being special, because she came from an important family that had lost everything. She mentioned something about an accident, about parents who died young." Jennifer opened the folder and spread photographs on the table. "We managed to identify the couple from Madison's descriptions. Richard and Sandra Mendez. He's an import-export businessman. She's a decorator. They live in a gated community in Colombia." Robert examined the photos. "And you think they have Anna Grace?" "Not just her," Jennifer replied gravely. "Faith, tell them about the connection we discovered." Faith looked directly at Robert and Susan. "I know who you are. I knew, but I didn't remember until last night." "What do you mean?" Susan asked, confused. 5 years ago, I was in an orphanage in a big city. I was 14 and about to be transferred to a home for troubled teens. But someone paid for me to go to a better foster family, a family that would give me an education and opportunities. Robert felt a chill run down his spine. "Faith." The name on the paperwork was the Hope Foundation, but later I found out that behind that foundation was one person who funded everything: Robert Mason. The silence that followed was deafening. Susan looked at her husband in surprise. She knew about his philanthropic activities, but she had never known the specific details. "You saved me when I was a teenager," Faith continued, "and now you're saving Madison. And maybe you can help me save my daughter." Madison woke up at that moment, as if sensing the tension in the air. She looked at Faith and then at Robert. "Did Uncle Robert know, Faith?" "Yes, sweetie," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I didn't remember. There have been so many children over the years," Jennifer intervened. "The point is, this connection isn't a coincidence. Valerie knew about it. She chose to leave Madison at that abandoned house near your business on purpose." "Why?" Susan asked. "Because she was under pressure. Her scheme was falling apart. Other children were being looked for. She needed a scapegoat, someone to divert attention." Faith completed the line of thought. "She wanted you to be accused of being involved in the scheme. A wealthy businessman with a history of helping children would be the perfect fall guy. The revelation hit Robert like lightning. Valerie hadn't just used his company, she had manipulated the entire situation to frame him if she was ever discovered. "But now we have an advantage," Jennifer said. "We know where Anna Grace is, and Madison can help us identify other children and other buyers." At that moment, Jennifer's cell phone rang. The conversation that followed left everyone tense. "That was my supervisor," she said after hanging up. "Valerie has filed a formal complaint against you. She's claiming that Robert is the real head of the operation and that she was just an employee who found out everything." "That's absurd," Susan exploded. "I know, but she presented documents, the same ones Adam forged, as proof. The situation is now official. You're under investigation." Robert sat down heavily in a chair. "So she did it. She made me the guilty one." "Not yet," Faith said with determination. "We have Madison. We have my story. And now we know where to find my daughter. If we can gather enough evidence before Valerie destroys everything—" "It's dangerous," Jennifer warned. "If we go to Colombia and can't get concrete proof, you could be arrested. And Madison could be returned to Valerie." Madison, who had listened to everything with extraordinary attention for her age, suddenly spoke up. "I know where Grandma Valerie hides the important papers." Everyone turned to her. "Where, sweetie?" Susan asked. "In the house with many rooms. She had a box under the bed in the blue room. She kept papers and money there. And pictures of the children." Jennifer leaned forward. "Do you remember where that house is?" Madison closed her eyes, concentrating. "There's a bakery on the corner that smells like sweet bread, and a church with a bell that rings in the morning. And there's a big number on the door, an 8 and then more numbers." "This is incredible," Jennifer murmured. "With this information, I can try to locate the property." Faith was getting more and more agitated. "We can't just break into her house." "We don't have to break in," Robert said, an idea forming in his mind. "We can make her come to us." "How?" "She wants Madison back, right? So we'll give her exactly that, a chance to get Madison back, but on our terms." Susan looked at him with concern. "Robert, that's too risky." "Everything we've done so far has been risky, but now we have information she doesn't know we have. We can turn the tables." Jennifer shook her head. "I can't officially support this, but unofficially, if you could get concrete evidence before presenting it to the authorities." The plan they began to hatch was audacious and dangerous. Robert would contact Valerie, pretending to give in to the blackmail. He would arrange a meeting to return Madison, but it would be a carefully planned trap to make Valerie incriminate herself. "What if it goes wrong?" Susan asked. "If it goes wrong, at least we tried," Robert answered. "I can't live knowing I handed a child over to criminals without a fight." Madison, who was playing quietly with her teddy bear, suddenly approached Faith. "Auntie Faith, you're going to get your baby back." "How do you know, sweetie?" "Because Uncle Robert and Auntie Susan are good, and good people always manage to help other good people." The child's simple faith touched everyone. Faith hugged Madison, whispering, "You're very brave, you know that?" "I learned to be brave by thinking about the birdies," Madison replied. "They fly even when they're scared." That afternoon, Robert made the call that would change everything. Valerie answered on the first ring as if she had been waiting. "Mr. Mason, I'm glad you've decided to be sensible." "I want to make a deal," he said, controlling his voice. "But I need guarantees." "What kind of guarantees?" "I want your word that after I return the child, you'll stop blackmailing me. And I want proof that you'll destroy the fake documents you have against my company." Valerie laughed. "All right. We can meet tomorrow night. I know a discreet place. I'd prefer to choose the location myself. Have it your way, but come alone, and bring only the child." When he hung up, Robert knew the next 24 hours would determine all of their fates. The plan was in motion, but there were so many variables that could go wrong that he preferred not to think about them all. What he didn't know was that Valerie was also planning a trap for him, and that the next day's meeting would be far more dangerous than any of them imagined. The day of the meeting dawned grey and tense. Robert had barely slept, mentally reviewing every detail of the plan they had devised. The chosen location was the parking lot of a half-built shopping mall on the outskirts of the county, large enough for multiple escape routes, but isolated enough for a conversation without witnesses. Susan was visibly shaken during breakfast. Madison, sensing the tension, was quieter than usual, clutching her pink teddy bear. "Is Uncle Robert going out?" she asked with that childlike intuition that always surprised them. "I'm going to solve some problems, sweetie," he said, kneeling down to her level, "but I'll be back soon." "And Grandma Valerie?" Robert hesitated. "I might see her today." Madison hugged him tightly. "You're stronger than her, the birdies told me." The child's innocence made Robert's heart ache. He had promised to protect her, and now he was about to put himself in an extremely dangerous situation. At 2 in the afternoon, Jennifer arrived with discreet recording equipment. "Remember," she said, adjusting the small recorder on Robert's shirt, "we need her to confess specific details of the scheme, names, amounts, locations. The more specific the confession, the better." Faith was present, insisting on being part of the plan despite everyone's protests. "My daughter is involved in this. I have a right to be here." "It's too dangerous," Susan argued. If something goes wrong, at least we'll be together trying to fix it." At 4 o'clock, Robert left for the meeting. The plan was simple in theory. He would arrive alone, as Valerie had demanded, but Jennifer and a support team would be strategically positioned around the site. Faith would stay with Susan and Madison at home, waiting for news. The parking lot of the unfinished mall was a surreal scene: bare concrete structures, abandoned construction equipment, and a sense of emptiness that made every sound echo. Robert parked near the center of the space and waited. Valerie arrived promptly at 5, driving an old car accompanied by 2 different men from the one she had brought to the office. When she got out of the vehicle, Robert noticed she seemed more tense than last time. "Mr. Mason," she said, approaching cautiously, "where's the child?" "First, I want to see the guarantees you promised," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Valerie signaled to one of her companions, who brought a folder. "Here are the originals of the documents that compromise your company. After I have Madison back, I'll burn them all in front of you." Robert examined the papers. They were the exact forgeries Adam had created, but organized to look like evidence of a systematic operation. "This isn't enough," he said. "How can I be sure you don't have copies?" Valerie laughed bitterly. "Because it's not in my interest to keep evidence against you after I get my granddaughter back. I have other plans for the future." "What kind of plans?" The question was calculated to make her talk, and it worked. Valerie, perhaps out of nervousness or arrogance, began to open up. "This business here has gotten too dangerous, too many people asking questions, too many nosy social workers. I'm thinking of moving to another state, starting over." "And the other children?" "What other children?" Robert pressed harder. "Madison told me about other children you cared for. What happened to them?" Valerie's face hardened. "The girl talks too much. That's always been her problem, but that's none of your business. If I'm going to hand a child over to you, I need to know what kind of person you are." "The kind that solves problems," she said, her voice growing harsher. "These families come to me because they have problems they can't solve on their own. Very young girls who get pregnant, families with no money to feed another mouth, desperate people. And you solve these problems how? I find families who want children and can afford to pay for them. Everybody wins." Robert felt nauseous, but kept pressing. How much do you charge for this service? Depends on the child. Healthy babies are worth more. Older children like Madison are harder to place, but she has special qualities. What qualities? Valerie looked at him with growing suspicion. Why so many questions? Did you bring the girl or not? She's safe, but I need to understand the situation better before making a final decision. There's no decision to be made, said one of the men accompanying Valerie, stepping forward menacingly. You're going to hand over the child now. Robert took a step back. Or what? Or things will get very unpleasant for you and your family, Valerie replied. It's not just your company at risk, Mr. Mason. Accidents can happen to anyone. The threat was recorded with perfect clarity. Robert knew he already had enough material to incriminate Valerie, but he needed to find out more about the whereabouts of the other children. Where do you keep the children before you deliver them? He asked. In safe places, away from curious people. Madison mentioned a house with many rooms. Valerie's face turned pale. What else did she tell you? About a box under a bed, with papers and photos. At that moment, Valerie realized she was being manipulated. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. You didn't come here to return the girl. You came here to make me talk. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The two men with Valerie positioned themselves to block Robert's escape routes. The businessman realized the plan had gone wrong and that he was in real danger. Where is Madison? Valerie demanded, all pretense of cordiality gone. In a safe place. How long do you think you can hide her? I know where you live. I know where your wife goes shopping. I know the route you take to the doctor with the girl. Valerie's words revealed she had been watching the family for longer than they had imagined. Robert felt fear icing his veins. At that critical moment, sirens began to wail in the distance. Valerie's expression instantly changed to panic. You brought the police, she accused. I didn't bring anyone. But the sirens were getting closer. Valerie and her accomplices ran for their car, but before she left, she yelled at Robert, "This isn't over! I'll get back what's mine, whatever it takes." The car sped away, leaving Robert alone in the parking lot. Moments later, Jennifer came running from behind one of the concrete structures. Are you okay? The sirens weren't ours. It must have been some emergency in the area. Did you record everything? Yes. We have clear confessions about the scheme, direct threats, and an admission of surveillance. It's more than enough for a search warrant. But when they returned to the Masons' house, they found a situation that changed everything. Susan was visibly distraught, and Madison was hiding under the living room table. What happened? Robert asked immediately. Valerie called, Susan said with a trembling voice. She knew you weren't there alone. She said if we don't hand over Madison by midnight, she'll do something terrible. What kind of terrible thing? Faith, who was comforting Madison, looked at them with tears in her eyes. She said she has my daughter, and if we don't give Madison back, we'll never see Anna Grace alive again. The plan had partially worked. They had evidence against Valerie, but now she had escalated the situation to a level none of them had expected. The lives of two children were at stake, and time was running out. The next few hours were the most tense the Mason family had ever experienced. Jennifer worked frantically to get search warrants based on the recordings, but the legal process was too slow for the deadline Valerie had imposed. Midnight was approaching fast. Madison, sensing everyone's distress, had become even quieter. She clung to her pink teddy bear, softly humming the song her mother used to sing. Faith couldn't stop crying, tormented by the thought that her daughter might be used as a bargaining chip. We have to think of something, Robert said, pacing nervously around the room. We can't just hand over Madison, but we can't ignore the threat against Anna Grace either. Susan held Madison in her lap, her psychologist's mind, working to find a solution. What if we could locate where Valerie is keeping Anna Grace? How? She could be anywhere, Faith replied in despair. It was then that Madison spoke up, her voice small but clear. I know where she takes the children when she wants to hide them. Everyone turned to her immediately. Where, sweetie? Susan asked gently. It's a different house from the one with many rooms. It's a house in the middle of trees where there's a small pond. Grandma Valerie took me there once when she was scared of someone. Madison closed her eyes using her photographic memory. There's a little bridge you have to cross to get to the house, and there are ducks, and the lady who lives there has white hair and talks very softly. Jennifer noted every detail. Anything else you remember about this house? There are numbers on the mailbox, a 2, a 7, and another number I don't remember. And there's a sign that says Creek something. With this information, I can try a search of rural property records in the area, Jennifer said, already grabbing her phone. While Jennifer made calls, Faith approached Madison. Sweetie, when you were at this house, did you see any other children there? I saw a baby who cried a lot. The lady with white hair gave her a bottle, and Grandma Valerie said it was temporary, that someone would come get her soon. Faith's heart leaped. What did this baby look like? Do you remember? Madison concentrated intensely. She was tiny with dark hair, and she had a little mark on her arm like a tiny moon. Faith let out a muffled cry and began to sob. It's her! Anna Grace was born with a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left arm. The revelation energized everyone. They now knew that Anna Grace was likely alive and possibly at the location Madison had described. But they still needed to find that place before midnight. Jennifer returned with promising information. I've found 3 rural properties that might match the description. One of them is registered to a Connie Stevens, 67, with no criminal record. She could be the white-haired lady Madison mentioned. Where is it? Robert asked. About 20 minutes from here. I'll send a team to check it out. No, Robert said firmly. If you send an official team, it might scare Valerie and she could do something drastic to Anna Grace. Let me go first for reconnaissance. It's too dangerous. Everything we've done so far has been dangerous. Faith stood up. I'm going with you. If my daughter is there, I need to be there. Faith, if it's a trap, at least we'll be together. I can't stand just waiting here anymore. At 10 o'clock at night, Robert and Faith left for Connie Stevens' farm, leaving Susan and Madison under Jennifer's protection. The drive was tense, with both lost in their own fears and hopes. The farm was in an isolated rural area, just as Madison had described. There was a small bridge over a creek, and the house was surrounded by trees and well-kept gardens. Lights were on in the windows, suggesting people were home. Robert parked at a safe distance, and they approached on foot. Through one of the windows, they could see an elderly woman with white hair arranging baby bottles in the kitchen, and in the playpen next to her, a baby of a few months slept peacefully. It's her, Faith whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's my Anna Grace. But before they could decide how to proceed, they heard the sound of a car approaching quickly on the dirt road. It was Valerie, arriving visibly agitated. Robert and Faith hid behind some trees and watched Valerie enter the house. Through the window, they saw a heated argument between her and the elderly woman. Valerie gestured nervously and pointed at the baby. She's trying to convince the woman to hand over Anna Grace, Robert murmured. The situation escalated when Valerie picked up the baby, clearly against the elderly woman's will. Faith made a move to run to the house, but Robert held her back. If we show up now, she might flee with your daughter or do something worse. At that moment, Robert's phone buzzed. It was a message from Valerie. I know you're following me. Show yourselves now, or you'll never see this child again. They had been discovered. There was no choice but to face the situation directly. When they entered the house, they found Valerie holding Anna Grace, who was crying inconsolably. The elderly woman was sitting in a chair, visibly upset. "Connie didn't want to give me the child," Valerie said in a tense voice. "After months of caring for her, she got attached. But business is business." "Valerie, it's time to stop this," Robert said. "You've caused enough suffering." "I didn't cause suffering. I solved problems. Connie was paid well to care for the children temporarily. The families who adopted got the children they so desperately wanted. Everybody won." Faith took a step forward, her eyes fixed on her daughter, except for the birth mothers who were deceived. "You were desperate when you came to me," Valerie retorted. "No money, no support, with a violent boyfriend. I offered you a way out. You offered a lie. You said it would be temporary." Anna Grace continued to cry, and Faith felt every fiber of her being screaming to hold her daughter. But Valerie held the baby tightly against her. "Where's Madison?" Valerie demanded. "In a safe place," Robert answered. "How long do you think you can protect her? I have contacts, resources. I can make your lives a living hell." It was then that Connie, who had remained silent until that moment, spoke up with a trembling but determined voice. "Valerie, that's enough. This child needs to be with her real mother." "Connie, you don't understand what you're saying." "I understand perfectly. You told me the mother had abandoned the baby, but now I see her. She came looking. She loves this child." The unexpected intervention from the elderly woman changed the dynamic of the situation. Valerie realized she was losing control over everyone she had manipulated. "If you don't bring me Madison by midnight, I will disappear with this baby forever," she said, her voice filled with desperation. "No, you won't," said a new voice at the door. Everyone turned to see Jennifer entering the house, accompanied by 2 law enforcement officers. "Valerie Ferreira, you are under arrest for child trafficking, document forgery, and extortion." Faith's relief was so intense that her legs gave out. Connie quickly took Anna Grace from Valerie's arms and handed her to Faith, who could finally embrace her daughter after months of separation. But Valerie's arrest was just the beginning. In the hours that followed, even more shocking revelations would come to light, and the true extent of her network would be uncovered, connecting people and situations in ways no one could have imagined. 6 months after Valerie's arrest, life had found a new balance for everyone involved. The living room of the Mason's house was decorated with colorful drawings of birds, Madison's creations, that now proudly adorned the walls, no longer hidden or a cause for punishment. Faith arrived for the weekly Sunday lunch carrying Anna Grace, now 8 months old and smiling at everyone she met. The baby had fully recovered from the difficult months and was showing healthy, happy development. "How was your week?" Susan asked, welcoming Faith with a warm hug. "Good. The business administration course is going well, and Anna Grace is finally sleeping through the night." Faith had found a part-time job at an accounting firm and was taking night classes in business on a scholarship that Robert had discreetly arranged. She lived in a small but comfortable apartment, also financed by the generosity of the couple who had truly become her adoptive family. Madison ran to greet Anna Grace, who immediately smiled upon seeing the older girl. The connection between the two was special. They had shared a traumatic experience that uniquely bonded them. "Hi, Anna. Look what I drew for you," Madison said, showing a paper with 2 colorful birds flying together. "It's you and me when we grow up." During lunch, Robert shared the latest news about Valerie's case. "Jennifer told me they've found 5 more children through the investigation. All have been reunited with their biological families or placed in appropriate homes." "And Connie?" Faith asked. "She's fully cooperating with the authorities. We found out she truly believed she was helping. Valerie convinced her it was a legitimate social program. She won't be prosecuted, but she's getting counseling." Susan served pudding for dessert, a special recipe Madison had helped make that morning. The important thing is that all the children are safe now. Madison's recovery had been gradual but consistent. The first few months were difficult, frequent nightmares, fear of being alone, episodes of anxiety when she heard loud voices. But with a lot of love, patience, and proper psychological support, she had blossomed. Her extraordinary memory, which was initially crucial to the case, now helped her in positive ways. She remembered every kind word, every caress, every moment of security she experienced with the Masons. These good memories were gradually overwriting the traumatic ones. "Auntie Susan," Madison said after lunch, as they all sat on the porch watching the birds in the garden, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, sweetie." "Why did you and Uncle Robert help me when you didn't know me?" Susan looked at the girl, her eyes filling with tears of emotion, "because sometimes people come into our lives when we need each other the most. Like the birds that fly together? Exactly like the birds that fly together." The comparison was not accidental. Madison had developed a passion for bird watching, and Robert had installed several feeders in the garden to attract different species. It was therapeutic for her to watch the birds' freedom, reminding herself that she too was now free. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived who brought the final revelation that would complete the story's circle. Richard and Sandra Mendez, the couple from Colombia who had brought other children from Valerie, appeared at the gate, accompanied by a social worker. Robert received them cautiously, unsure of what to expect. During the investigation, it had been discovered that they were victims as much as they were perpetrators. They had tried to adopt legally for years, facing bureaucracy and denials, when Valerie approached them, offering a quicker solution. "Mr. Mason," said Richard, a man in his 50s, with a haggard look, "we came to apologize and to make an important confession." They sat in the living room, where Faith and the children were also present. Sandra held a folder of documents, her hands trembling slightly. "We bought a child from Valerie 2 years ago," Richard admitted. "We thought it was legal, that she was representing an orphanage. But when the investigations began and we discovered the truth," Sandra continued, her voice breaking, "we realized we had participated in something terrible." Faith leaned forward, her heart pounding. "What child?" Sandra opened the folder and took out a photograph. "A little girl. At the time, we were told her parents had died in an accident and she had no family." When they showed the photo, Madison came closer to look. Her face lit up with recognition. "It's Carla. I used to play with her at the house with many rooms." The revelation struck everyone like lightning. Madison remembered Carla, a slightly younger girl she had met during her time with Valerie. "Where is she now?" asked Jennifer, who had arrived to monitor the situation. "With us," Sandra said, "and she's well cared for, very loved. But when we found out the truth about how she came to us," Richard finished, "we want to do the right thing. If she has a biological family looking for her, we want to help reunite you." Carla's story unfolded over the next few hours. Her parents had indeed died in an accident, but she had an aunt who had been desperately searching for her. The aunt had been deceived by Valerie, who said the child had been placed with a suitable family through legal channels. "Is Carla's aunt alive?" Madison asked, hopeful. "Yes, and she will be so happy to know that Carla is safe," the social worker replied, but the biggest surprise was yet to come. During the meeting with Carla's aunt, a final connection was discovered that no one could have predicted. Carla's aunt was a distant cousin of Faith's. They had lost touch years ago when their families moved to different cities. "Faith?" said the woman in her 30s when they met. "Faith Smith? You're Joanna Smith's daughter?" "Oh my God, Christina, I can't believe it." The reunion between the cousins was emotional, and revealed how the paths of all these children were more connected than they ever could have imagined. Christina had also benefited from the same social program Robert had funded years ago when she was a teenager. In the months that followed, a support network formed naturally. Christina and Carla moved to the county to be close to their extended family. Richard and Sandra, deeply regretting their unwitting participation in the scheme, set up a fund to help other families with legal adoption processes. Robert's company fully recovered from the scandal, and Adam, after completing community service and treatment for his gambling addiction, was forgiven and resumed his job under supervision. On the eve of Anna Grace's first birthday, all the families gathered in the Masons' garden for a party. Madison, now 5, and more talkative than ever, told stories to Carla and made Anna Grace laugh with her games. "Did you know I'd have 5 children one day?" Susan said to Robert, watching the 3 girls play while Faith and Christina chatted animatedly. "5?" he asked, confused. Madison, Anna Grace, Carla, Faith and Christina, they all found a home here in some way. Robert smiled, hugging his wife. "I think Brian would be happy to know we turned our pain into something that brought so many people together." As the sun set that day, Madison was in the garden drawing more birds. But this time, they weren't solitary birds flying in search of freedom. They were entire flocks, flying together in formation, caring for one another, protecting the younger ones, and finding strength in unity. The girl who had been left alone in an abandoned house was now surrounded by a family that chose to love her, and she had helped other children find that same love. Her journey from abandonment to belonging had become the seed of a protective network that would spread far beyond what any of them could have imagined. And when Madison hummed the song her biological mother had taught her, it was no longer a lament of longing and loneliness. It was a song of gratitude for all the mothers and fathers of the heart she had found along the way, and a promise that true love always finds a way to overcome fear and darkness. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.